Hi there, I'm Wendy McCallum, burnout and alcohol coach and wellness expert, and you're listening to Bite Size Balance, where everyday extraordinary women share their stories, expertise, and wisdom, all in the name of lifting each other up and creating a better life by design. Whether it's wellness, career, relationships, food, alcohol, mindfulness, hormones, or parenting, we talk about all things women's balance. If your life looks great on paper, but it still feels like something's missing, you're in the right place. Welcome to Bite Size Balance.
Hello, it's your host, Wendy McCallum, and I am back today with my favorite guest. Dr. Sarah Baillie is here again. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
We have a lot to talk about today. The first thing we want to do is we want to talk about a really exciting new announcement, which is that our program that we have been busily working on behind the scenes is finally opening for registration. And it is actually the week of this podcast, it will be open for registration. So we want to spend some time talking about that because we are super excited about that. Are you as pumped as I am, Sarah?
Oh yeah, I can't. I didn't even know I had this as a dream, but it's kind of the culmination of everything, you know? It's just like, okay, this all makes so much sense to put this together now at this time in my life, at this time in your life, at this time in so many women's lives.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with someone the other day and I was saying like, I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of years trying to figure out like, who are the women that I really want to be supporting. And I've known generally who that is in terms of women between the ages of 40 and 60 who are high achieving, successful women, struggling with overwhelm and using unhealthy coping mechanisms more often than they'd like to as a result of that overwhelm. But this program is really, I feel like this is my sweet spot. And like you said, it's kind of like the culmination of all the work that I've been doing over the last 10 or 11 years. And it's coming together in just such an amazing way. I am genuinely, I think, the most excited about this program of any program I've ever done. And part of that is because I get to do it with you, which is so fun. So we're going to talk about that program. And then we also are going to be answering some questions from listeners. Again, feel free to send us your questions. You can always send me an email or DM me through social media and let me know you have a question that you would like either me or Sarah and I to address in a podcast, and we will happily do that. So we have a few of those that we've collected over the last few weeks that we are going to address. Let's start with the program. Sarah, would you like to introduce this program? You want to tell everybody what the name of the program is? Because I think you guys, we might be most excited about the name that we came up with.
Well, we tried a number of things. Lots of texts back and forth, lots of trying it out on family members.
What was the one, Sarah, what was the one that we were like, we'd love to use it, but it's just way too controversial? Remember the something to do with like hot, the word bitches was definitely in it. And it was,
like own your menopause bitches.
No, burnt out bitches.
No, burnt out. That's what it was. My husband actually suggested that one.
We rejected that. That went in the reject pile. But
that's the tone.
Yeah. We went through a lot of names. We wanted something that was that really reflected what this program is all about. But at the same time, we wanted it to reflect our personalities and, a little bit of the irreverence, I think, that you and I have towards a lot of these stereotypical notions about what it means to be perimenopausal and menopausal. So I'm drum rolling right now with my hands. If you can't see, what is the name of the program, Sarah?
The name is WTF. And other than what the fuck, it stands for Women Talking Frankly. The missing conversation about hormones, burnout, and midlife.
Yeah. So it's WTF, which, of course stands for what the fuck is happening to me. But in a more politically correct language, it's Women Talking Frankly. And it's the missing conversation about hormones, burnout, and midlife. And we're so, so excited about it. That really is the program in a nutshell. And we just wanted to give you a little bit of information about it because it is open for registration. As of right now, registration will only be open for a short period of time. Effectively, it's our pilot. So it's the first time we've run this program. And as a result of that, we are capping registration. So there will be limited registration. And we are also offering some pretty incredible founders rates. So what we have created is a program that is a combination of a course and a membership, basically. So we knew we wanted to offer a course that gave women really the basic stuff that's missing from this conversation. And we have called that WTF 101. So it's our 6-module course. And when you sign up for this program, you get immediate access to that course. It drips weekly, but you will get the full WTF 101 course in the first 6 weeks that you're in this program. After that 6 weeks, you have the ability to stay in the membership. And in the membership portion of the program, you will continue getting new weekly content from Sarah and I. So we are busily behind the scenes recording modules. We have some incredible content for you that will continue coming through the course of the membership. So for as long as you stay in the monthly membership, you will get a weekly lesson basically from Sarah and I every week. The most exciting part of this program, though, is the weekly coaching sessions. So this is the piece that I have wanted to do for a very long time with Sarah. I have wanted to get in a room, whether that's a Zoom room or a live room with Sarah, with a bunch of women and just have the missing conversation. And that is what is going to be happening in the weekly live group coaching calls. Sarah and I will be present on each of those calls. We will be answering your questions, and we will also be doing live coaching and presenting on topics. So those, I think, are where the real value in this course lies. Because of course, if you want to work with me privately, it's pretty expensive by the hour. And same thing goes with seeing Sarah. So we have created a platform where you have access to both of us at a really affordable rate, especially on these founders rates, you guys, which are a complete steal, to be honest. But we wanted to open this up, and we really want to test this with a big group of women. And that's why we've kept the rates really low for this first offering of WTF. So you get the weekly content, and you also get the weekly live coaching sessions, which will all be recorded, and the recorded replays will be posted in the online membership area so that you can go access those if you can't attend a call. And then we also are going to be opening up a private support group. At this point in time, we're going to be using Facebook for that. That may change down the road, but for now, it's going to be a private Facebook support group, which will be open 24/7, where you can continue the missing conversation with other like-minded women struggling with the same types of things you're struggling with in between those live coaching calls. So that's basically the nuts and bolts of this course or program. It starts with the 6-week WTF 101, which is an incredible amount of information, really, really valuable. Sarah, maybe you can go through some of the topics that we talked about.
Yeah, we laid down the foundation of what hormones are impacting you at midlife, how they're changing, what those changes result in, how does that manifest in your daily life, and then you talk about sort of foundations of stress management, how stress is playing a role in your life, and then sort of the mashup between those two things in the perfect storm of how these come together and manifest really side by side and intertwined, and it's sort of inseparable for most women around this time of their lives. And so we sort of cover the foundation of what's going on, but then we move into what you can do. So we really want to have a positive spin on this. Yes, women are suffering and they're confused and they don't know what the fuck's going on in their bodies and their minds and everything. How much of that I see in my office every day is incredible. Just the sort of, I don't know what's happening. This is not my body anymore. It's not my mind. I can't have no control over it. And so what we're trying to do is give you the foundation of how to take back some of that power and really celebrate this transition, because it's really quite remarkable. It's a remarkable phase of your life, and we want to make that transition as easier and more joyous, really, and to also, number one really for us is to create a community. Because women are not talking about this. It just blows my mind how few women actually talk about this. And I can't stop talking about it. My family's tired of hearing about it, and they don't really want to know because they're, my kids are young. So
probably selfishly, we're just creating a community for ourselves to talk about this, because everyone's tired of listening to us talk about it all the time.
Right.
But I think actually we started with, we recognized together, like the story is my menopause was kind of off the rails and I did not know what the fuck was going on. I honestly had no idea, which again is one of the reasons we called the course WTF. I was really overwhelmed with it. I was struggling with a lot of really severe symptoms. I ended up in Sarah's office basically at the end of my proverbial rope. Really felt like I was losing my mind. sat down with Sarah, and within like the first few minutes, I felt like a completely different human being. I felt like finally somebody understood what was going on. I felt validated, like I wasn't abnormal, and that these things that I was feeling, both emotionally and physically, were totally typical for what was going on. She also gave me an explanation for what the fuck was going on. It was the first moment in like months where I felt like, okay, maybe, just maybe, there's some hope here for me, and this isn't going to go on forever, and I'm not losing it completely. So that is what led to me asking Sarah to be a guest on this podcast. And she was my very first guest on this podcast. It was an incredibly empowering conversation, so enlightening for me. I mean, we had the conversation in her office, and I said to her, like, we both kind of had this moment of like, this is the conversation that's missing, that needs to be happening somewhere else. And I said, well, hey, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. Maybe that would be a good place to have this conversation. And so Sarah came on that first episode. We had a really great conversation. We got amazing response from you guys who listened to that first episode. And so many women were saying to me, you need to have Sarah back. You guys have to continue having this conversation. And of course, we've been doing that on this podcast, and we're doing that again today, answering questions around midlife and hormones and burnout and all the rest of it. But what we thought to ourselves is, what can we do with this conversation? Like, how can we take this conversation we're having together and actually get women in the conversation instead of just listening to us have the conversation? How do we get you guys into the conversation? And that is really what led to the creation of this program. So again, as Sarah said, we have this really great 6-module course that starts you off to give you that foundation level of knowledge that you need. And then basically in all the subsequent lessons and also the coaching calls, we're going to be digging in really deep to all of this stuff. And we're going to be answering your specific questions and starting conversations around there's just such a multitude of topics that naturally arise out of this intersection between midlife and hormones and stress for busy women. So we're really, really excited about it. All the details for this program are available now there's a web page now that's dedicated to this. You can go to www.wendymccallum.com/WTF. That's www.wendymccallum.com/WTF. You can get all the information, the details, the pricing, and the link to register. Remember, though, that these founders rates really are the founders rates. This is a pilot or a beta of this program. We are accepting only a certain number of women. We have a massive wait list as a result of starting to talk about this a couple of weeks ago, which is really exciting for us. It means you guys want this. The idea of this program is resonating with you. The idea of creating a community of your own around this topic is something that you're excited about and we're excited about. But because of that large wait list, we expect this program to fill up pretty quickly. So it is time limited in terms of the registration or enrollment period, and the founders rates will only be available this spring. When we relaunch this program, which we hope to do again in the fall, the rates will be different. So I think that's it. Sarah, do you feel like I've missed anything?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, this is, I just feel like it's, again, I use the word culmination, like it's a culmination of our work, of the time in our lives, but then it's also the culmination of like a time in history when there's a lot of women reaching perimenopause and menopause at this time, right? A huge percentage of women who don't necessarily have a voice in that, or because they don't understand what's happening.
Yeah.
And so
totally true. And they're also, sorry to interrupt, but there's also a lot of women reaching perimenopause and menopause right now who have been under chronic stress for the last 20 plus years of their life, because we are the first generation of women to really try to do it all. That's the truth of it.
Yeah. So it's, there's so much to learn about each other and so much to learn. I'm looking forward to learning more about this topic through reaching a whole bunch of other women, because I see the self-selected women that end up in my office, and I see the women who are in my social circle, but the greater community, I'm so interested to hear what other people are experiencing and how we can help you through that.
Yeah. Well said. So we would love to see you in this program. We would love you to join the missing conversation with us. We cannot wait to get this sucker going. We have been doing our best to speed this up and just be able to launch it. And we are now in a position to do that. So we're excited about it. So again, if you want the details on the program or you're interested in registering, go to www.wendymccallum.com/WTF. Okay, let us get started on the listener questions. So the first question we have, Sarah, is from a friend of mine, actually, Erin, who I had a private conversation with, and she's been listening to the podcast. She loves our conversations, but she had a really great question. And she said, I hope that you guys can answer this. She said, I have a hard time closing the stress cycle when I get home because my house, is always, there's always something to be done when I get home. There's dishes in the sink or there's stuff all over the place. And she said, it's just not relaxing to come home after a long day of work for me. She did say that her husband, shout out to Paul, she said her husband does not seem to have the same problem. He comes home, he can flop on the couch and he feels very much at peace. And it's like, a bit of a sanctuary for him to come into his house. She doesn't feel that way. So she said, I just never seem to be able to get a break. What can I do to close the stress cycle? Because you and I have been talking a lot about this concept of closing the stress cycle, which is to pull yourself out of that kind of chronic place that we find ourselves in, a fight or flight with our cortisols up and we're kind of like, anxious and pumped up, into the natural second stage of stress, which is the relaxation response, where we kind of come down from that and our blood pressure comes down and we relax a little bit and our breathing slows down and our cortisol comes down. And I thought it was just a really interesting question because I had never really thought of it that way. What Erin was saying in our conversation, which I know she'd be happy for me to share here, is that when we come home, we're not really coming home to home. We're coming home to our second place of work, a lot of us. And so, it was interesting too, because Erin was talking about back in the days of the cave woman. She said, we've kind of maybe been biologically programmed and just over the course of history and evolution it's just been hammered into us that our job is to take care of the cave or the home front. And, so therefore it feels like a second job when we come home and it's not relaxing. Do you have any thoughts on that? I'm kind of pulling this out of left. Sarah is not prepared for this question. So let's see what she says.
Well, the biggest thing that I notice around that, and I have talked about this on another podcast, is how in the 20s and 30s, when the hormones are high and the hormones of nurturing are high, so that's estrogen, when you have, whether you have children or not, doesn't really matter. I think this is my theory. To be honest, this is my theory. I was just from observation. I've done some reading. I think it's valid that this hormone of nurturing keeps us kind of in a fog around how much work we're actually doing in terms of managing. I'm going to use families because that's where a lot of the stress comes from. It's like actually trying to manage a family and their mess on top of things. I mean, if you live by yourself, if your house is dirty, that's on you, right? If you come home and your house is dirty because everybody else has made it dirty, then that's a different story. But so in those back to the idea of in those high, like those reproductive years, if you will, then and there's a lot of hormonal support to actually look after the cave. It might not be right and the balance may be off. And, we know that women carry a lot more of the housework duties and that women also carry the emotional load of the family. And so that's a whole other conversation about whether that balance is right or not. But the fact of the matter is that the hormones actually help you manage that during that time. Right. And so coming up to midlife, what we have those hormones going away. And I like to think of it as a veil, like the veil drops and all of a sudden you can see
the dirty
what's actually happening, right? Like, I mean, you could see it before, but you had some sort of there was like a buffer or some ability to just get it done. Right. It's the get it done hormone, right? It just has to be done. So get it done. When you hit those mid 40s and you're exhausted from getting it done, and also your hormones are starting to change, all of a sudden, or you become patently aware of the fact that that all this shit's going down around you, right?
Yeah.
And then that can feel, because you're tired and burnt out and possibly not sleeping well, that can feel like you don't have the resources anymore to actually do this stuff. And when we've talked before, we've talked about, like, we'll use children as an example. Like, if you're hitting your mid 40s, like in an ideal reproductive way, your kids would be going to university, so you wouldn't actually be having to deal with picking up toys and shit,
Mhm.
right? So you're hitting this phase. Women are having babies later, and you're very aware of the fact that, well, wait a second, I actually don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And it's overwhelming, and because the resources aren't there, because you're already exhausted, it's like your body's saying, I don't really want to put energy into this, so it feels even more exhausting, right?
Right.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, totally. And then of course there's the stress associated with the fact that the house is a
Yeah,
disaster and you don't feel like doing anything about it. And of
yeah,
course, again, maybe partly due to changing hormones, but you're annoyed with and
yeah,
irritated. And we've talked about this before. When your resources are depleted like this, it sometimes shows up as just increased irritability. You're just
yeah,
annoyed and irritated at the fact that nobody else is helping to clean up this mess
yeah,
that they all made,
yeah,
not just
yeah.
you. So
Sorry, often, what happens is, because of that just get it done attitude for as long as it goes on,
mhm,
is that everyone else gets a bit of a free ride.
yeah,
So obviously little kids get a free ride because they're little kids, but somehow, all of a sudden you've got family members whose laundry is being done by you just because that's what you've always done. I'm just
right.
using laundry as an example,
Yeah,
when really your teenagers could be doing their own laundry. Your husband could certainly be doing his own laundry, or your partner, whoever.
right.
But it sounds very 1950s. I don't like the way that sounds, but it's a role a lot of women find themselves in, is just always doing the same things that they've always done, and
Yeah,
everybody else, while they may be contributing in small ways,
yeah,
may not be contributing as much as you need them to at this point. And I usually
yeah.
suggest, once we have this conversation, because they have no idea what you're going through. So my suggestion is that you go home after we've had this conversation about hormones, and you actually sit these people down and say, listen, this is what I'm going through.
Right.
I'm done. Like, I'm
Yeah.
done doing all this extra work. And so it's time for you to step up.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. You and I are on the same page about this as per usual. I was thinking to myself, this is a sign that, and it does sound 1950s housewife, but it is actually the reality for I would say the majority of women. Like you just,
Mhm.
and part of it is too, I think, Sarah, we start doing it for our kids when they're little because of course we have to. And
Yeah.
then it's just almost easier. I hear this a lot from women.
Yeah.
They're like, it's
It's
easier to just
easier.
keep doing it than to try to
Yeah.
like get other people to do this stuff that nobody wants to do or knows how
Yeah.
to do. And I get that. But at the same time, this is like a cry for help from your body.
Hmm.
When you come home and you're not remotely relaxed or happy to be home because it just feels like more work.
Yeah.
I think you need to listen to that. And you're absolutely right. You need to have a conversation with your people and say, this is what I need from you. And then you need to put the effort in that is required to actually train kids how to do more
Yeah.
laundry or clean up the kitchen or whatever. And eventually that balance will start to tip a little bit and you'll find that more things are being done. However, you also have to figure out how to relax through all of
Yeah.
this. And so the second piece of the question, really, and the part that I want to focus in on, is how do I close the stress cycle when my house is a mess? So
Hmm.
assuming nothing changes quickly, because I think we both know that's not going to happen. You're not going to instantly
Yeah.
have a clean house because you told your teenagers they need to pull up their socks. So if things stay the same, how do you do that? And, I have a couple of ideas around that, and you probably have some ideas as well. Like, just practically speaking, my suggestion is that you keep a space that is your space.
Hmm.
So you find a space in the house that you do have more control over, that you can keep tidy, that feels relaxing for you, whether that's, a bathtub, or it's your bedroom,
Hmm.
or it's the backyard, or it's an office or something. And go to that place first when you come home and give yourself the
Hmm.
opportunity to do something that actually feels good. And you do
Hmm.
probably need to set that up with your family. You need to say to them, look, this is what I'm going to do. I need to transition after work. I'm going to give myself 30 minutes at the end of the day, and I'm going to go do something else before I come down and we start working on dinner or whatever the next thing is. Now, I get that that's probably not available to all women coming home from work, because if your kids are younger, you don't have, that's just probably not even possible for you. But you can get 5 minutes. You can always get 5 minutes, but you need to ask for it. And even 5 minutes of calm transition time can be really helpful in terms of closing that stress cycle. Sarah and I have talked on other episodes about all of the different ways you can close the stress cycle. And many of them are very, very simple. As simple as just like finding out yourself a place of calm and quiet and taking 10 deep breaths. Or listening to a piece of music that, is relaxing and just lying with your eyes closed for 5 minutes. I mean, there are so many simple things you can do to close the stress cycle. So that was my gut on it, was find yourself a place that is, your own, and you can keep it in a way that it actually does feel relaxing when you go in there. What was your gut thought on it, Sarah?
I've got a few.
Great.
Can I say them all?
Yeah.
So one of the things that you can capitalize on is well, maybe not during Zoom time, but when lockdown lifts and you're actually coming home to your home instead of even coming out of your office, I think it's important to capitalize on that time. So, it's not very helpful to your nervous system to listen to the news on the way home.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so putting on music that makes you feel joyful, it doesn't matter what it is. It could be blues and country, or it could be classical, just something that makes you feel joyful or relaxed,
Yeah.
Listening to a podcast that makes you feel invigorated, as opposed to a podcast that makes you think, what the hell's happening in the world? We don't want that. There's a time for news, and it's not at the end of your day in that transition. That transition should be sacred.
Yeah, totally agree. I just want to interject. I have an idea on that. That is something that I used to do that I forgot about. So I have the Calm app on my phone, which is one of my favorite meditation apps. It's really accessible for everybody. It's not too woo-woo and out there. And most women can use it and figure it out pretty easily and find it to be really a helpful app. So I got into the habit. It wasn't so much because I don't commute, because I've always worked from home. So it's not so much in the commute, but I use it when I'm running around with my kids at night. I would connect my phone to my speaker in my car, and I would actually listen to one of the Calm soundtracks, or not like a meditation that's going to cause me to fall asleep or anything, but something that is just calming. So sometimes I will drive with just the sound of the waves.
Yeah.
And I'll turn it on high, and that is really relaxing. So that's a great point. The idea of like using the transition time between leaving work and getting home as a time to actually bridge that gap and pull yourself out of fight or flight and down into a more relaxed space.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your next idea? Because you have a bunch.
But my next idea was having a snack before you leave the office. So I find that a lot of women end up in low blood sugar town before they get home. And then the panic's on. Get supper ready, get everybody organized. And if I come into the house with low blood sugar, I can see everything that's wrong with everybody and everything immediately, right? It's just a hangry, not really present, not grounded state of being. And so I usually suggest that somebody have a high protein, high carbohydrate, high complex carbohydrate snack. Like if you can do nuts, like a nut butter and an apple or something, or some hummus and vegetables. It doesn't have to be huge. It's just enough to take your body out of the possibility that it might starve forever. So it's, when your blood sugar is low, a bunch of things go off in your system, alarm bells saying that, oh my gosh, we have to mobilize some resources now. And we just want to avoid that, so the body doesn't have to go through that by giving it a small snack to just reassure it that it's going to be fed. And then usually that makes people calmer.
Well, the thing that people don't realize is that your brain as an organ fuels itself almost entirely from glucose in your blood. So when you have no blood sugar because you haven't eaten for a very long time, which you're absolutely right, is really common right before dinner, that people have low blood sugar because the last meal they ate was lunch at noon, and they've been powering their way through the afternoon and they're in a rush to get home, so they haven't eaten anything. When you have very low blood sugar, your brain is literally starving. It just doesn't function properly. And this is why a lot of those symptoms of low blood sugar present as things like, brain fog, crankiness, headache, lightheadedness, irritability, exactly. And that is because your brain is like, feed me, please, for the love of God, feed me. So the simple step of having a small meal, like Sarah said, something that combines some good quality, like protein and a little bit of fat, maybe with some good carbs. So, really what we're talking about there is like, don't eat carbs on their own. That's really the rule here. So don't grab a handful of crackers or pretzels or something. That's just probably going to make the situation worse because you're going to have another blood sugar spike and a low after that. Instead, grab something that's going to provide you with a little bit of lasting energy and a nice steady release of sugar into your blood. So as Sarah said, hummus and vegetables, Greek yogurt with some berries, apple with some, or banana with some nut butter on it, a handful of almonds or cashews or something like that, hard-boiled egg, like those types of things are going to help do that. And then you're going to be in a better state of mind. And then chances are, Sarah, when you walk in and your house is a mess, it's not going to feel like it's as big of a deal, right? Because your brain's going to be able to process it and handle it better. Yeah.
So my other thing, I will talk about this probably on every podcast, is caffeine. So
go for it. I feel like it's a good thing I don't drink caffeine anymore. Otherwise I would be feeling very shamed on these podcasts because we talk about it so much. But I do want to say, can we just say though, not everybody needs to give up caffeine, but for a lot of women, like if you're struggling with a lot of the symptoms and things that Sarah and I talk about in relation to hormones and burnout, it cannot hurt to cut back on your caffeine. So go ahead with that disclaimer, Sarah, go ahead.
Well, for many women, I won't say everybody, for many women, caffeine stimulates your cortisol. So, cortisol is a stress hormone. And if you want to feel more stressed, then add some caffeine to the system. Plus, caffeine actually lasts much longer than you think it does. The effect of caffeine can go on into the evening, even if you've only had a coffee at 9 o'clock in the morning. Right. So if you're someone that's sleeping and sleep isn't an issue for you, and generally anxiety isn't an issue for you, and you're doing fine on one coffee a day, then that's okay. But if you're someone who's having trouble sleeping and feeling anxious, then you might want to reconsider that. But if you're okay on one coffee, that's fine. Just don't have another one if you find that by 4 o'clock and you're coming home and you've done all the other things, you've had a snack and you've listened to your Calm app, that you're still super irritable when you come home or super overwhelmed by the mess, then you might want to give up that second coffee or just switch it to decaf.
Yeah.
And see if that takes your nervous system down a notch. I mean, really what we're just trying to do is just turn the volume down on that nervous system response so that everything isn't so acute. Because the mess until you sort out, delegate, some of the chores, then the mess isn't going anywhere. So part of this is to actually manage your reaction to it.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, is that your last idea?
I had one more, which was taking a quick walk around. One of the ways to close the stress cycle is to exercise. And so before you leave the office, or, leave your office and then walk around your building, go for a 15-minute walk, do that transition. I find my home is quite close to my work, but I find that some days I resist riding my bike because then my transition time home is too quick. I can be home in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But I started a couple of years ago taking a really long route on my bike to get home, just to switch that transition, just to get that little bit more exercise, just to have time that's for me time. And, so just carving out, it doesn't even, just 15 minutes sometimes is enough. So even if you came home and said, I'm not doing anything until I take the dog for a walk. And by the way, I'm going by myself.
Yes.
Just even 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And that can just smooth that transition for you.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I used to be able to walk to work and I loved it. When I lived in Calgary, in the first house we lived in, I used to walk to work, and it was really a transition time. It was a time to get rid of all of the worries and thoughts and anxieties and stuff that you've been carrying around all day around work, and kind of let that stuff go, and then just give yourself an opportunity to get into the groove of, what the rest of your day was going to look like. And one of the things that I've recommended to a lot of the women I've worked with is, taking a look at whether there's a place you can park your car that is actually 15 or 20 minutes away from your office. So if you are commuting from out of town, which many people are commuting into the city for jobs, is there a parking lot or a garage or somewhere where you can leave your car, or even a street parking where you can leave your car and walk the last 15 or 20 minutes into work, and then walk back to your car at the end of the day. It can do, I call it bookending, right? So I love it when women are bookending their day with stress management stuff. So you start your day off with something that's relaxing, and you end your day off with something that's relaxing. And in a perfect world, you also throw in a bunch of stuff, as we've talked about on this podcast, mindful moments at the very least, in your day over the course of the day. But yeah, I think that's a great idea too. So those are all our ideas, Erin, if you're listening to this podcast, around what you can do to try to close the stress cycle when you get home. But we also want to say, we hear you. We too feel like our homes are second jobs and a place of work. I feel that way. Sarah, do you feel that way?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So for example, when my husband says you need to get away,
Yeah.
it's very clear that I need to leave the premises. So
Right.
his idea of a vacation is actually staying at home, puttering, working on his car, doing stuff around the house, reading, napping. My idea is getting the hell out of Dodge. Like, get
Yeah.
me away from all these people and away from my house and the constant to-do list.
Yeah.
And now I really sort of understand that it's because for me, the house is just an endless cycle of work, and he's able to just put blinders on, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's a skill,
It
frankly.
is a skill, and it just feels to be like it's a male dominant skill.
It is, and whether is that biological, is it sociological, who knows? But it's amazing how much that can happen.
Okay, let's move on to our second question, which is from another listener who says, my sleep has gotten much worse in the last few years. I don't want to go on meds, but I'm tired all the time. What can I do? This is such a good question. And I think it will resonate with many people listening to this podcast, because as we've talked about on the podcast, and we don't need to go into all the details of why this is happening, but sleep is notoriously challenging for women in their 40s. It becomes harder and harder. It becomes more and more elusive. And I deal with it all the time in my practice around, balance and burnout for women, trying to help them regroup, fill their cups up again. And sleep is almost always the first thing that I work on with women, because it is really a foundation habit, and it impacts so many other aspects of wellness. So it's one of those things where if you can get that sorted, it often has this really incredible trickle down effect in all these other areas of your life, including, like you're not going to exercise if you're exhausted, or, and you're probably going to have less resources to prepare your food in advance and stay on top of that kind of stuff if you're exhausted. So I think it's a great question. And I know you probably would say the same. I mean, how often does sleep come up in your practice?
Oh, sleep's number one.
Yeah.
Number one for me. Even if they've come in for something else, sleep is the first thing I deal with, because quite often women have just become used to it and it's not their primary concern anymore.
Right.
But when we do a little bit of an excavation of that and really look at the quality of sleep, even though a woman might be getting 7 hours, it might not be good quality. The famous "I'm a light sleeper" statement is unfortunate, because you just kind of start to live with that. But I really feel that the changes that women are looking for when they come into my office aren't possible until we have sleep sorted out.
Right.
So that's my number one priority. And we can't always get it perfect, but we can certainly do a better job than when they come in and what they've become used to. And so for me, it's about the immediate. So how can we move forward with helping you with the other things? But it's also about the long term. If sleep has started to go, then if we don't fix that, then 5 years from now, burnout is an absolute guarantee.
Yeah,
really.
So if we're giving advice when we don't know anything about this person's circumstances in terms of what they're doing or not doing. So we'll just generalize which is all we can really do on this podcast anyway. So just generally give some ideas around things that can help to improve sleep for women. I'm going to leave caffeine to you, because I know you'll want to mention that one. I would start with anybody by taking a look at when they're going to bed and when they're waking up. That's always my first starting place. So take a look at your sleep routine. Do you have a sleep routine? A lot of the times these women don't have a sleep routine at all. It's very haphazard. And it's partly because they're so exhausted and sleep deprived that it's hard to, they're falling asleep sometimes really, really early because they're so tired. But I would start first with trying to create some kind of routine around sleep. We know it's really important and helpful from a wellness perspective to be going to bed at around the same time every night and waking up at around the same time every day. Our body does better when it's in that groove and that routine. It's not always possible at every point in our life, but By the time we get into midlife, it is often more possible for us, again, because our responsibilities and obligations are shifting, and we often don't have little kids in the home anymore, for example, that we're having to wake up with in the middle of the night or early in the morning. So I'd start there and I say, like, okay, what time are you going to bed? If you're going to bed really late, my suggestion is you start moving the time that you go to bed back by about 15 minutes in the first week or two. And I actually get my clients to set an alarm to remind them, because we'll forget that we're supposed to be trying to get to bed earlier because we're watching Netflix or whatever. So I start with 15 minutes earlier for the first couple of weeks. That's one small change you can make. And then we will slowly back that time up until we get to a more reasonable bedtime. The goal is 7 to 9 hours of decent sleep, and how much each person needs, it varies on a person to person basis, but you want to be waking up feeling restored. If you're not waking up feeling ready to go and restored, then you're probably either not getting enough sleep, or the sleep that you are getting isn't restorative sleep. And you need to do some things to try to improve the quality of your sleep. So I start with the bedtime wake up thing, and then we start building routine into that. So I say, okay, it's not just about going to bed at the same time and waking up and getting, like, technically being in bed for 8 hours. That's not what matters here. We also want to make sure that you're unwinding before you go to bed. So especially if you're having difficulty getting to sleep when you get into bed, if that's, and some women struggle with that and other women don't, they struggle more with waking up in the middle of the night. So if you're struggling with the getting to sleep, then I definitely am going to be working with you on a routine around, for everybody, turn off your screens. So talking about, like, getting off of screens at least an hour before bedtime. And that's in itself sometimes for women a massive ask. And it takes a long time. So you don't want to do all this stuff at once. Anybody who's listening, you just want to do it one step at a time, right? But try to get off of your screens like an hour or so before you're actually going to be turning your light off, so that you're getting your brain out. And that's partly because of the blue light thing, but it's also because most of the stuff we're looking at on screens is not relaxing, calming stuff, right? It might be the news, like we were talking about before, but it could be like just a television program. Like if you're watching a program that's, ER, for example, and someone just got impaled by a, tree in a windstorm, that's not a relaxing thing to be processing in your brain. I don't know where I come up with these things, this podcast as an aside.
You just dated yourself by saying ER.
Oh my God. My daughter, who is, I will say this in my defense, my daughter, who is just turning 17 this month, has watched every single episode of ER. It had a bit of a comeback there, I think.
Oh, did it? Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I am dating myself. I think everyone knows how old I am. I'm not worried about it. This is the least of my worries in terms of things I've disclosed on this podcast, Sarah. But anyway, you don't want to be watching things like that, or even on social media, which we know, even if there are, there's some funny stuff and some, positive stuff happening on social media, the bulk of social media is not positive, and it definitely doesn't lead to like a calm state in our brains when we're on there. So getting a break from technology is really important. Take the damn phones and iPads out of your rooms, people. Do not have your phone plugged in at your bedside. Yeah. They make alarm clocks still. They still sell them at Walmart. Go get yourself an alarm clock. I know, but women are always like, I can't, it's my alarm. I'm like, okay, it's like $10 at Walmart. Go get yourself an alarm clock. But we really don't want to have those devices turned on for sure in our rooms. And I just think even if you have it turned off, the fact that it's there next to your bed, if you're somebody who wakes up in the middle of the night, means you're far more likely to reach for it and turn it on, which then subjects your brain to the blue light again, but also you get back into that stress cycle because you're looking at something that ramps your brain up. So getting your devices out is also really important. And then the last little piece that I would say around a sleep routine is doing something calming in the time between when you shut your devices off and you turn your light off. And that can be a multitude of things. Some of the women that I work with like to use that time to do some journaling, and they might do a little bit of meditation or their gratitude. Other women like to have a warm bath, read a book. Some women do a little bit of light stretching or yoga. Like there are a million things you can do. You can listen to a sleep story on Calm. I just like to read. That's what I do most nights. I go to bed. I usually read for at least a half an hour before I turn my light out. And I don't read work stuff at night.
Yeah.
And that just gives my brain a chance to transition as well. And I've personally noticed that the nights when I don't do that, and I stay up late because we're trying to finish a show or something, and then I go to bed and I'm too tired to read, I struggle with sleep in those nights. It makes a big difference for me. So those are some of my ideas. And Sarah, I know you're going to have lots of ideas around sleep too. So what do you got?
What do I have? Well, there's so many factors
Hmm.
involved. We just talked about caffeine.
Yeah.
Basically we want the sleep is problematic because it becomes a really nasty vicious cycle. Because if you're not sleeping, then it's very easy to develop anxiety about not
Yes.
sleeping.
Yeah.
Am I going to sleep? Am I going to sleep? And ha- counting the hours then, whether you wake up in the middle of the night and it's 2 o'clock and you're thinking, I've only got 4 more hours to sleep, I've only got
Right.
3 more hours to sleep. That kind of mindset is really self-perpetuating, and it can cause a lot of disruption. So there's a couple of things around that. One is that you should never look at your clock in the middle of the night. So go buy yourself a Walmart alarm clock and then cover it.
Yeah. Or
Uh,
turn it the other way.
turn it.
Yes.
Well, we don't want any light.
Oh, true.
So we
Yeah.
don't want any lights in your bedroom. So we want the body, if you're struggling with sleep, we want the body to think it's dark, like think it's
Mm.
nighttime. And so covering all the lights, and that's one thing about the devices too, is to get those little tiny, even the like my laptop has a little tiny blue light that
Yeah.
can actually light up a whole corner of the room, shockingly, and pulses.
Right.
So, covering those, getting them out of the room, covering your clock. I think it's really, really important, and it takes a lot of discipline to not look at the time.
Hmm.
But that just sets off a huge cascade of worry
Hmm.
in most
Yeah.
people's brains, and that feeds into any other sort of high cortisol state you've been in during the day. So if you imagine that, if you're spending your day like most women, running from saber-tooth tigers, and sort of putting out fires, and living in a heightened degree of getting stuff done, and if the body's perceiving that as a threat in any way, then it doesn't understand why you're going to bed. So it doesn't understand why you suddenly want to, you suddenly safe, right? If you just go
Right.
straight from that, which includes watching screens, if you
Hmm.
go straight from that to bedtime, then there's no reassurance to the nervous system that there aren't still predators out there. There isn't
Right.
still a saber-tooth tiger prowling. And so it's very hard for the body to get into a sleep when it's competing with that instinct for survival, which is, wake up, there's a predator, and oh no, it's nighttime, go to sleep. So that's kind of the play between the melatonin, which your body's producing, and the
Mhm.
cortisol, which is saying melatonin's trying to drop you into a nice deep sleep,
Yeah.
restorative, repair the system, and cortisol saying, what the hell are you doing?
I actually
There's
I wanted to say this to Sarah. I've been wanting to have a moment where I can use the meerkat analogy, which I'm about to give you.
Yes, yes.
So I read this and I was in like a chat, some kind of chat forum around menopause because, as is clear, I am totally fascinated by all things women's hormones right now. And I don't know what I was looking for, but I ended up in a little group where women were talking, they were talking about sleep. And this woman described it in a way, and I was like, that is exactly what it feels like. And now I know that my waking at night is hormonally connected. And I guess it always is, but for me, I think it probably is related in some way to those reproductive hormones and
Hmm.
maybe a little bit less around the cortisol. I don't know, but she described it as the meerkatting. Like, and so if
Yeah.
you don't know what I'm talking about with a meerkats are these little animals that are like, they pop up from holes and they're tiny and they have beady little eyes. They're kind of cute. And they put their paws up in front of them and they're just like, they're darting, their heads are darting all over the place.
Yeah. They're
And
alert.
they're super alert. And that was I thought it was such a great description
Hmm.
of what it feels like for me when I wake up in the middle of the night. I'm like meerkatting and I'm like, what's going on? Why am I awake? What's happening? Because there's no lead up to it for me. It just happens. And it really does feel like in that moment, like I'm being chased by a saber-toothed tiger because I can't figure out why I would be awake except for some emergency. That's what it feels
Yeah.
like. I think you've described it as like, a 5 alarm fire or whatever. Like it feels very abrupt and sudden. And like there
Hmm.
really is no, it's not like I'm tossing and turning and then I'm slowly coming out of my sleep. It's like I'm up like a meerkat.
Hmm.
So when you were talking about how that feels in the whole saber-tooth tiger thing and trying to calm yourself down, I can totally see the connection between that and getting to sleep for women at the beginning stages of sleep. But what do you recommend for someone who wakes up and is meerkatting? Can you do the same thing? Like, for example, I have used there's a yoga nidra a recording that I sometimes use in the middle of the night. Now, this requires me to break my rule about not having my phone in the room, which bothers me.
Yeah.
But I will just sometimes put my earbuds in and just listen to this really calm yoga nidra thing, which I think basically tells my meerkat self that it's okay to go back in the hole because the predator's gone or something. But is there anything else that women can do when they're having that like sudden waking up feeling?
Well, sometimes women don't have that sudden feeling as well. So it doesn't always have to be that. You can kind of gradually wake up into a state of full awakeness.
Yeah.
I find having a piece of paper, a journal, and a pencil or pen beside you is really helpful, because often that wake up spins into thinking about all the things that you have to do or work or stress like that. You can be actively trying to not do that, but still we have monkey minds, and if given a chance, it'll just start. And so I find it useful to have that for women so that they can actually just start making lists. Right. So it's like, okay, just even if it's just a code word, just get it out so that it's not there. So you're going to remember it. So there isn't this feeling that I might forget. Making sure you're checking in at that time. I mean, part of that is awareness. So are you waking up hungry? I mean, that's
Sarah, I think we all know I'm waking up sweaty.
Well, I know you're waking up sweaty, but this is a question for the other people in the group.
This isn't all about me?
It's not all about you.
It's my podcast. It should be all about me.
I know you're sweaty, and of course we have to deal with that too. So when we look at the underlying things going on, obviously we want to take care of night sweats and heat, and sometimes that racing feeling, and especially if there are heart palpitations, is also hormonal. So we want to rule out the hormonal. We want to rule out the cortisol. We want to look at nutrient deficiencies, like magnesium can be very good for sleep, for example, and we want to spend some time doing the calming practices that you're talking about to reassure the nervous system that it's safe to sleep. And that takes a long time, especially if it hasn't slept in a long time or you've been in a high state of stress for a long time. So it's kind of like, if you say, when women come back and they say, well, I tried the yoga nidra for 3 nights and it didn't work. I was like, no, you're going to do this for the next 10 weeks every night, and then you can tell me whether or not it worked. Because
probably in conjunction with these other things that we're talking
about. With other things, of course, that's pretty critical. But just back to the hunger, a lot of people these days are trying things like intermittent fasting, or people not eating before bed because they have heartburn, those sorts of things. And that's not always the right thing for everybody, right? And so it may seem good in theory, but if you're someone that's waking up in the night, and if you make a piece of peanut butter toast, you'll actually go straight back to sleep, which is my son and used to be me when I was younger, then you need to stack your supper with some long-term sources of fuel. Right. And so, and you might even be someone who needs a little snack before bed.
And so this is really actually a great point. I had a client a while, like many years ago now, who was a type 1 diabetic, and she had struggled with sleep for years and years and years. And she came to see me for some other stuff, but also some food related support. And I worked with her on the food side of things, really without, I was like, look, I'm not a sleep specialist. I don't know what's going on with your sleep. And I'm definitely not a diabetes specialist. I said, I'll help you with these. I'll help you with your date, what's happening in the daytime. And so we worked on the daytime eating, and she got into a better routine of eating regularly, not skipping meals, eating, lower carbohydrate meals, not no carbohydrate meals, but lower carbohydrate meals, always paired with some good quality protein and fat, including eating a good meal, solid meal at night every night, which she hadn't been doing, and a snack at night that was, had some good carbs and proteins and fats in it. And within like a couple of weeks, she was sleeping through the night. And what we realized was happening was that she was having these incredible blood sugar lows in the middle of the night, which were waking her up. And, this is a real thing. Now, she was obviously, type 1 diabetic. So maybe her swings were more severe, but I've seen this happen in other women. And I'm glad you raised this, well, I'm just not going to eat anything after dinner. I'm never going to snack. And then they struggle at night because they wake up. Sometimes they wake up physically hungry. Like their belly's growling, they feel hungry. And other times they wake up and they maybe don't feel hungry, but like you said, if they have something to eat, that can help them go back to sleep. So And when I was actually in the throes of all the sweatiness, which I'm still in, by the way, but at the beginning of the throes of the sweatiness, I talked to a naturopath in the States that you had recommended I talk to through the MAC when I was taking the maca supplement. I talked to their naturopath at that company, and she suggested I have a handful of cashews before I go to bed. And it was part of it. She said, like, you just want to make sure you rule out any other reasons why you might be waking up kind of abruptly in the middle of the night. So I think what we're saying here in all of this is sleep is incredibly complex. And this is one of the many topics that we expect to be digging into in a major way in the WTF program. And we can't possibly cover all of it, here, because it is an ongoing conversation, and it very much depends on what you are going through, what you're dealing with, because sometimes it's a stress related thing, sometimes it's a hormone related thing, sometimes it's a physical thing, sometimes it's a combination of those things. So I think we've given you hopefully lots of things to think about. Thank you very much to the listener who sent this question in, and there are probably a million other things that Sarah and I could talk about this, but for now, unless there's something pressing that you did not say that you really think you need to say, Sarah.
No, there are so many aspects that we'll get into it in the course, and we'll see what happens there.
Okay, well, thank you, Sarah. As always, I always learn something when we have this missing conversation. Thanks for being here today to answer listener questions.
That's great. I'm glad to be here anytime.
And just a reminder, everybody, the WTF Women Talking Frankly program, the missing conversation about hormones, burnout, and midlife is now open for registration. You can get more information on that on my website at www.wendymccallum.com/WTF. That's WENDYMCCALLUM.com/WTF. We would love to have you join us in the missing conversation, and I will see you next time, Sarah.
Bye.
You've been listening to Bite Size Balance with your host, Wendy McCallum. As a burnout and balance coach, I help busy high achievers like you create a more balanced, joyful life. To be sure you don't miss any upcoming Bite Size conversations, subscribe now to this podcast. For more balance and wellness tips or to connect with me, visit my website at wendymccallum.com. That's WENDYMCCALLUM.com.